"That's not a dog," Dr. Elias Harrison murmured, the words slipping out before he could stop himself. His gaze remained fixed on the small, trembling creature nestled inside the battered cardboard box. Beside him, Liana, the young nurse with a heart as warm as her smile, drew in a sharp breath. "What do you mean?" she asked, leaning closer, her eyes wide with curiosity and concern. Elias didn't answer right away. His pulse fluttered like a hummingbird's wings as he reached inside, his hands cradling the tiny animal with the gentleness of a first snowfall. Its fur was impossibly soft, yet thicker than any puppy's he'd ever touched. The snout was delicately elongated, the ears rounder than they should be, but it was the eyes that held him captive, large, golden, and unblinking, gleaming with something deeper than confusion, something ancient, something wild. The reception area of Harrison Veterinary Clinic was hushed this late in the evening, the usual comforting hum of chatter absent. Whoever had left the box had vanished like a shadow, leaving no note, no explanation, just a damp cardboard box lined with a frayed towel, as if it held nothing more than an unwanted pet. But this was no ordinary puppy. Liana reached out tentatively, her fingers brushing the creature's fur. "It looks like a husky mix, maybe a Malamute." Her voice wavered, uncertain, but there's something different about it. Elias exhaled, shaking. His head. "I don't know yet, but we need to check it out properly. Let's move it to the back." Liana nodded, carefully lifting the little one into her arms. It barely stirred, its small body quivering not just from the cold but from something deeper. Fear. Shock. Elias swiftly prepared his instruments, his movements precise, yet tender. "Let's get a weight first," he said, settling the creature onto the digital scale. The screen flickered before settling on a mere 2 lbs. "Small for a husky mix," he murmured. As he continued his examination, his fingertips traced the delicate ribs, feeling the steady heartbeat beneath. The little one let out a faint whimper but didn't struggle, as if trusting him completely. Then he noticed it, the paws, thicker pads, sharper claws, even for a baby. "Something's off," he admitted, frowning. "Liana, get me a DNA kit. I want to run a test." She moved swiftly, retrieving the kit while Elias swabbed the inside of the creature's mouth with gentle precision. Those golden eyes never left his, unblinking, wise beyond their years. "We'll know more when the results come back," he sighed. "But I don't think this is a dog." Liana swallowed hard. "Then what is it?" Before he could answer, the front door chimed. A gust of cold air swept through the clinic as a tall, broad-shouldered man stepped inside, his jacket zipped tight against the chill. His piercing blue eyes scanned the room before locking onto the box. "I need to know if someone dropped something off here tonight," he said, his voice firm. Elias and Liana exchanged glances. "Why do you ask?" Elias replied cautiously. The man hesitated, then stepped closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Because if they did, you might have something in your clinic that doesn't belong here. That's not a dog." The words hung in the air, heavy as a winter fog. Elias studied the stranger, his pulse quickening at the urgency in the man's tone. Liana, standing close, looked just as bewildered, her gaze flickering between the man and the tiny creature on the table. Elias cleared his throat, keeping his voice steady. "What do you mean it doesn't belong here?" The man's eyes never left the trembling animal. "You wouldn't understand," he said after a pause, "but I need to see it." Instinctively, Elias shifted, placing himself between the stranger and the exam table. "Sir, this is a veterinary clinic. I don't know who you are, and I'm not about to hand over an abandoned animal just because you say so." For a moment, the man's jaw tightened. Then, with a frustrated sigh, he stepped back, running a hand through his thick hair. "Fine," he muttered. "But you don't know what you're dealing with. Just don't let it out of your sight." With that, he turned on his heel and strode out, the door chiming softly behind him. The silence that followed was thick, broken only by Liana's whisper. "What was that about?" Elias exhaled, shaking his head. "I have no idea." His gaze returned to the small creature on the table. It trembled slightly, those golden eyes, too knowing, too wise, staring back at him. A pang of something unfamiliar tugged at his chest. Not pity, not just concern, responsibility. He couldn't ignore the stranger's warning, but he also couldn't turn away from this fragile, mysterious little life. "We need to run more tests," he said firmly. "Liana, get me the portable ultrasound. I want to see what's going on inside." She nodded, hurrying off as Elias prepared the device. His hands moved with practiced care, gliding the probe over the tiny abdomen. He searched for answers, for anything that might explain why this creature, so small, so strange, felt like it had stepped out of a storybook. And while those golden eyes watched him, as if they already knew secrets he was only beginning to uncover. The ultrasound had revealed nothing alarming, just a small, underweight bundle of fur with perfectly healthy organs. No unusual growths, no hidden abnormalities, just a mystery, wrapped in soft fur, defying every attempt at easy explanation. Liana leaned closer, her brow knitted in thought. "Does it look different to you?" she asked softly. "I mean, compared to other puppies?" Elias nodded, his fingers gently tracing the creature's delicate frame. "It does," he admitted, "but I can't quite place why." With careful hands, he turned off the ultrasound and settled the little one back onto its soft towel nest. It didn't resist, didn't fidget, just sat there watching him with those uncanny golden eyes, as if it understood far more than it should. Elias rubbed the back of his neck, exhaustion and wonder tangled together. This wasn't just another stray. This was something entirely new, something that stirred both his curiosity and an unexpected protectiveness. The lack of answers weighed on him, but before he could dwell further, the phone rang, shattering the quiet. Liana slipped out to answer it, leaving Elias alone with the creature. Without thinking, he reached down, stroking the velvety fur along its back. A soft sigh escaped the tiny body as it relaxed under his touch, and for a fleeting moment, he felt it, a silent understanding, a fragile trust woven between them. When Liana returned, her expression was troubled. "That was the lab," she said. "They're swamped. It might be a week before we get the DNA results back." Elias frowned. A week? That felt like an eternity when so many questions hung in the air. Liana hesitated. "Should we call them back? Try to push it through?" Elias shook his head. "No, we'll wait. But I want to keep it here overnight, just to monitor it. I don't feel right sending it to a shelter until we know more." Liana's face brightened. "I'll set up a kennel in the back," she said, already moving to prepare a cozy spot. As the evening stretched on, Elias found himself drawn to the back room again and again. Each time he stepped inside, the little creature lifted its head, those luminous eyes meeting his as if sharing a secret only they knew. The air in the clinic seemed to hum with something intangible, as though this small being had quietly rearranged the very atmosphere around it. Liana felt it too. She visited the kennel every hour, murmuring gentle words, offering scraps of food and fresh water. And to their delight, the creature responded, eating tentatively at first, then even giving the faintest wag of its tail when Liana whispered to it. By the time they closed the clinic, neither of them wanted to leave. They took turns staying. Late, checking on their unusual guest, ensuring it was warm, safe, and comforted. They didn't speak aloud about what they both sensed, that this was no ordinary animal. It was something more, something neither of them could name, but both felt deeply. When the lights finally dimmed and the doors were locked, Elias sank into his desk chair, staring at the scans and charts spread before him. Everything pointed to a healthy creature, yet nothing explained those eyes, that quiet intelligence, the way it seemed to know things. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. The stranger's warning echoed in his mind. You might have something that doesn't belong here, but what did that mean? Exhaustion tugged at him, but sleep felt miles away. The mystery was deepening, and all he could do for now was keep the little one safe and wait. Wait for answers that might only lead to more questions. Morning brought a pale, delicate light seeping through the blinds of Elias's office. He'd spent half the night buried in books and online forums, searching for any clue about the creature's origins. Hybrid breeds, rare genetic quirks, even old folklore. Nothing matched. Now, with a long cold cup of coffee forgotten on his desk, he rubbed his gritty eyes, the restless energy of the night still clinging to him. Something wasn't adding up, and it wasn't just the creature's odd features. It was the stranger's words, the urgency in his voice. What didn't belong? Here, and why? Liana's arrival interrupted his thoughts. She bustled in, arms laden with a breakfast sandwich and a steaming coffee. "Morning," she chirped, then paused, studying him. "You look like you didn't sleep." Elias offered a tired smile. What gave it away? She set the food down and leaned against his desk. "Anything new come to mind?" "Nothing," he admitted. "I searched all. Night. Unusual breeds, hybrids, even genetic anomalies. No matches." Liana took a sip of her coffee, then nodded toward the back. "It's awake, by the way, eating a little. Seems more alert than yesterday." Elias stood, relief softening his weariness. "Good. Let's do another round of checks." In the exam room, the creature sat calmly in its kennel, those golden eyes alert and watchful. Overnight, it had perked up, head held higher, ears twitching at their voices. When Liana cooed to it, its tail gave the tiniest hopeful wag. Elias crouched down, slowly opening the kennel door. The creature stepped forward, sniffing his hand with quiet curiosity. It didn't bark or whine, but the way it leaned into his touch spoke volumes. It was beginning to trust them. He ran through the checks again. Temperature normal, heart rate steady. Even its weight had inched up, thanks to Liana's patient feedings. Thanks to the nourishing meals Liana had been carefully preparing, the little creature had regained some strength. Elias studied its paws. Those thick, sturdy pads and sharp, curved claws still seemed unusual, almost otherworldly. "Whatever it is," Liana murmured, her voice soft with hope. "It's starting to look healthier. That's a good sign, right?" "It is," Elias agreed, but a frown lingered on his face. "I just wish I understood what's really going on." Before he could say more, the gentle chime of the front door interrupted them. Exchanging a quick glance, they stepped into the reception area, where a woman stood waiting. Her coat was lightly dusted with snowflakes from the quiet overnight snowfall, and she clutched a small bag tightly against her chest, her fingers trembling slightly. Her hair was pulled back into a tousled bun, and her glasses sat slightly askew, as if she'd rushed here in a hurry. When Elias approached, her eyes flickered up to meet his, then darted back down to the counter, her nerves unmistakable. "Can I help you?" he asked gently. She hesitated, then finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I heard you might have taken in an abandoned puppy yesterday." Elias tilted his head, studying her. "We did, yes. Why do you ask?" The woman bit her lip before continuing. Did anyone come looking for it?" Liana, standing just behind Elias, answered softly. "Someone did, actually. A man, tall, with blue eyes and dark hair." The woman's face paled. "He was here." Elias's curiosity deepened. "Yes?" He insisted it didn't belong here. "Do you know him?" She nodded slowly, her voice so quiet it was almost lost in the hum of the clinic. "I do. And he's right. It doesn't belong here." A sudden chill ran down Elias's spine, and it wasn't from the winter air outside. "Why don't you come back to my office so we can talk?" he suggested. After a brief hesitation, she agreed. Elias led her down the hall, Liana following closely behind. Once they were settled in the office, Elias leaned forward, his tone steady but kind. "I'm Dr. Harrison, and this is Liana. Who are you, and what's going on?" The woman introduced herself as Nora, a wildlife biologist working with a small privately funded research group that studied cryptic species, rare, elusive animals often mistaken for more common ones, their existence barely known to science. According to her, the puppy wasn't a dog at all. It was a young member of a newly discovered species, native to a remote forest in the Pacific Northwest. "They look like dogs at first glance," she explained, her voice steadier now but still laced with concern. "But genetically, they're different. They're not entirely canine. We've been studying a small population in the wild. They're incredibly rare, and the fact that one ended up here, it's alarming." Elias and Liana exchanged a glance. "Alarming how?" Nora hesitated before continuing. "These animals are deeply sensitive to environmental changes. Their survival depends on very specific conditions. If this one was taken from its habitat, it could be in serious danger, and so could the rest of its kind." Elias frowned. "But why? Would someone abandon it here? Why not return it to the wild?" Nora's expression darkened. "I don't know, but if the man you described was here, it's possible he's involved. Our team has had run-ins with people trying to exploit these creatures, selling them as exotic pets or using them in illegal breeding programs. If he knows about this one, it's not safe." Liana leaned forward, her voice warm with concern. "We haven't heard from him since last night, and the little one is doing better now. Is there any way to protect it? Keep it safe here?" Nora shook her head. "This clinic isn't secure enough. If he knows it's here, he'll come back. You need to relocate it, somewhere we can ensure it's cared for properly and kept away from the wrong hands." Elias sat back, absorbing everything. "What kind of facility are you talking about?" Nora explained that her organization ran a sanctuary in a remote location designed specifically for cryptic species. It had the resources, expertise, and security needed to keep the animals safe. But moving it there would be risky. If the man from last night was watching, they couldn't afford to draw attention. Elias felt torn. He wanted to protect the little creature, but he wasn't sure he fully trusted Nora yet. What proof do you have that you're with this organization? And how do I know the animal will be safe there? Nora reached into her bag, pulling out documents, letters from her research group, photos of the sanctuary, and even a video showing similar animals thriving in their natural habitat. Elias reviewed everything carefully, asking questions, weighing her answers. Though he still had doubts, the evidence was convincing. Finally, he nodded. All right, let's say we believe you. How do we get it to the sanctuary without alerting the wrong people? Relief flickered in Nora's eyes. We have a plan. A secure, unmarked transport vehicle is on its way, driven by someone we trust completely. If we can keep the little one hidden until tomorrow morning, we can get it out safely. Elias agreed, and they spent the rest of the day preparing, reinforcing the kennel, setting up extra surveillance, and keeping everything quiet. Liana stayed, close by the kennel, murmuring gentle words to the little one, as if soothing a frightened child, while Elias and Nora carefully planned the transport details. The way Nora's eyes softened every time she glanced at the creature made it clear. Her concern was genuine, her dedication unwavering. Slowly, Elias felt his hesitation melt away, replaced by a quiet trust. As evening settled over the clinic, an unusual stillness filled the air. The small creature slept peacefully in its kennel, its sides rising and falling in steady rhythm, its tiny paws twitching now and then as if chasing dreams. Elias watched it for a long moment, marveling at how something so fragile could hold such profound mystery. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but one thing was certain. He would keep it safe through the night. Nora set up a makeshift workstation in Elias's office, her fingers flying over her secure comms device as she checked in with her team. The soft glow of her screen cast long shadows, but her focus never wavered. Meanwhile, Liana filled the clinic with the rich, comforting scent of freshly brewed coffee, her cheerful chatter weaving between discussions of favorite dog breeds and the latest veterinary breakthroughs. The tension that had hung over them earlier began to lift, replaced by an easy camaraderie. By midnight, exhaustion tugged at all three of them, but their determination held strong. They took turns checking on the little one, adjusting its blankets, offering quiet reassurances. Nora shared stories of the sanctuary, rolling green enclosures, misty forests, recreated just for creatures like this one. Her voice carried such warmth, such conviction, that Elias felt his last lingering doubts dissolve. But as the hours stretched on, every creak of the building, every rustle of wind outside, made Elias's pulse quicken. His eyes flicked to the security feed more than once, half expecting to see the stranger from the night before lurking in the shadows. Yet the night remained still, undisturbed. When dawn finally painted the sky in soft gold, relief settled over them like a warm blanket. The transport was just an hour away. Nora moved with quiet efficiency, gathering documents and supplies, while Elias and Liana prepared the little one for its journey. It was strange. Elias had only known this tiny being for a day, yet he felt an unexpected bond, a fierce protectiveness. He wanted nothing more than to see it safe, happy, far from danger. The transport arrived exactly as promised, unmarked, nondescript, driven by a woman with a no-nonsense demeanor but kind eyes. Together they secured the kennel, double-checking every latch. Before climbing in, Nora turned to Elias, her gratitude shining through her weariness. "Thank you," she said softly. "We'll take good care of it." Elias nodded, watching as the vehicle pulled away, a bittersweet ache in his chest. He didn't know what the future held for the little one, but he hoped, believed, it would find a home where it could flourish, free from fear and uncertainty. As the sound of the engine faded, Elias turned back to the clinic. The day's work loomed ahead, but for the first time since the creature had arrived, he felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they'd done the right thing. Liana caught his eye, offering a tired but genuine smile. Ready to get back to work? Elias returned the smile, rolling up his sleeves. "Let's do it." The hum of the transport faded into the distance, leaving Elias standing in the clinic doorway, hands tucked in his pockets. The past day replayed in his mind, a whirlwind of uncertainty, quick decisions, and quiet bravery. He glanced back at Liana, already tidying the reception area with her usual energy. No time to dwell. The waiting room would soon fill with patients, the familiar rhythm of the clinic carrying them forward. Elias moved to the supply room, sorting through bandages and syringes, the mundane task helping to ground him. Yet his thoughts kept drifting back. to golden eyes, to soft paws with strange thick pads, to the inexplicable sense that, for just a moment, he'd brushed against something extraordinary. "Hey," Liana called from the doorway. "First patient's here. You good to start?" Elias nodded. "Yeah, let's get to it." As the day unfolded, the steady routine of exams and reassurances pushed the lingering questions to the back of his mind. But every so often, a memory surfaced, the creature's quiet trust, the way it had curled into his hand. For a brief moment, he'd been part of something bigger, something rare and wondrous. By the time the last appointment ended, the clinic was quiet once more. Elias sat at his desk, the glow of his lamp casting long shadows. Liana had gone home, leaving him alone with his thoughts. The silence was heavy, inviting reflection. He wondered about the sanctuary. Had the little one arrived safely? Was it settling in? He itched to reach out to Nora to ask, but no, they'd agreed. Discretion was its own kind of protection. Some mysteries weren't meant to be solved. Some stories weren't his to follow, but wherever the little one was, he hoped it was running free. Elias turned to the stack of files on his desk, trying to focus on clinic finances, pending orders, and staff schedules. But even as he flipped through the papers, his thoughts kept wandering elsewhere. It felt like life had handed him a puzzle piece, one that didn't quite fit anywhere, yet couldn't be ignored. The following days at the clinic passed in their usual comforting rhythm. Patients came and went, tails wagged and purrs rumbled, and gradually the familiar routine settled back into place. Elias noticed Liana seemed to carry a new spark. Her smiles came easier, her interactions with clients more engaged. She'd even started brainstorming ideas to expand the clinic's community outreach. While Elias appreciated her renewed energy, he suspected it was her way of processing the same quiet wonder they both still carried. It wasn't until Friday evening, as Elias was finishing paperwork in the amber glow of his desk lamp, that Nora's email finally arrived. The message was brief but warm. "Transport successful. Our little one is safe and adjusting beautifully. Thank you again. We'll keep you updated." Elias leaned back in his chair, relief washing over him like a gentle wave, though it couldn't quite erase the lingering sense of unfinished mystery. His reply was simple: "So glad to hear. Don't hesitate to reach out if you need anything." As he shut down the computer and turned off the office lights, the clinic fell into peaceful darkness, illuminated only by the soft red glow of exit signs. Stepping outside, the crisp night air carried the scent of fallen leaves. Elias paused, tilting his head back to take in the starry sky. For the first time in days, he felt a quiet calm settle over him. The short walk to his car became a moment of quiet reflection. Whatever mysteries surrounded their unusual visitor, it was safely in Nora's care now. His role, to protect and nurture, had been fulfilled. At home, cradling a steaming mug of chamomile tea, Elias watched wind dance through the autumn leaves. Outside his window, he marveled at how one unexpected arrival in a cardboard box could ripple through their ordinary lives. While he might never encounter such wonder again, the memory would stay with him, a reminder that magic sometimes appears in the most unlikely places. Next morning, Liana bounced into his office, her eyes bright. "Hey," she said, "just wanted to say thanks for including me in last week's adventure. It was strange but special." Elias's smile came easily. "You were incredible. Couldn't have managed without you." Her answering grin sparkled with possibility. "Well, if any more mysterious creatures come knocking, you know who to call." As she left, Elias chuckled softly. Though the clinic had returned to its comforting routines, the memory of those golden eyes would stay with him. In quiet moments, when sunlight caught a dog's fur just so, or an unusual sound carried on the wind, he'd find himself wondering about their extraordinary visitor. Somewhere in a forest sanctuary, he liked to imagine their little friend thriving under Nora's care, its paws padding through sun-dappled clearings. Their paths may have crossed only briefly, but the encounter had left its Elias, a gentle reminder that even ordinary lives can brush against something extraordinary. Weeks flowed by like a steady stream. Liana's newfound energy never waned. She filled suggestion notebooks with ideas for improved protocols, community programs, even emergency response plans. While not all were feasible, Elias cherished her enthusiasm. Perhaps their unusual experience had given them both fresh eyes, helping them see their everyday work as something more meaningful. One brisk morning, as the clinic hummed with the comforting chaos of meowing cats, whining puppies, and even a chatty parrot, Elias was carefully examining a Labrador's injured paw when Liana appeared in the doorway. "There's someone asking for you specifically," she said, her voice carrying a curious note. "Says a friend recommended you." Wiping his hands, Elias stepped into reception to find a sharply dressed man in his 30s, crisp button-down, tailored slacks, an air of quiet professionalism. Yet something in his steady gaze reminded Elias strangely of their mysterious visitor from weeks before. But he seemed to be holding back something. Worry, curiosity, maybe both. "Dr. Harrison?" the man asked as Elias approached. "That's me," Elias replied. "What can I do for you?" The man introduced himself as Darian Trent. He explained that he worked with a private environmental organization dedicated to studying and preserving unique species in remote regions. When he mentioned the Pacific Northwest, Elias's interest was piqued. Darian's demeanor was polite, even warm, but Elias sensed an undercurrent of urgency. "I was told you might have some insight into a particular animal that surfaced in this area a few weeks back," Darian said. "It's been of great interest to our researchers. I understand it might not be here anymore, but I was hoping you could share anything you learned about it." Elias glanced at Liana, who stood a few feet away, listening intently. He chose his words carefully. "We did have an unusual case come through, but it was quickly transferred to a more suitable environment. I'm not sure how much I can tell you beyond that." Darian nodded, seemingly unfazed by Elias's cautious tone. "I understand. Any information at all could be helpful. Its condition, behavior, anything you observed while it was here." Elias hesitated, recalling the brief, strange time he had spent with the creature. He didn't want to betray any confidences, especially after Nora had gone to such lengths to ensure its safety. But something about Darian's approach, his calm yet insistent questions, made Elias reconsider. Could sharing a few details really put the animal at risk, or might it help someone who genuinely wanted to understand it? "Well," Elias began, "it wasn't in great shape when it arrived, undernourished, clearly frightened, but within a day, it started eating, gained some strength. It was different from anything I've seen before. Its eyes, the structure of its paws, even its behavior. It wasn't aggressive, but it also wasn't quite like a typical puppy, more reserved, as if it was constantly evaluating its surroundings." Darian listened intently, nodding occasionally but never interrupting. When Elias paused, Darian said, "That's consistent with what we've heard from other cases. Did it show any signs of unusual intelligence or problem-solving abilities?" Elias thought back. "It seemed highly observant. It would watch us closely, like it was studying us, but it never tried to escape or resist. I wouldn't call it problem-solving, but it gave the impression of understanding more than a regular animal might." Darian leaned forward slightly. "And when it left your care, did it seem stable? Healthy?" Elias nodded. "Yes. It seemed like it would recover just fine." Darian straightened, his demeanor still professional, but now tinged with a hint of relief. "Thank you, Dr. Harrison. I can't overstate how valuable this information is. We're doing everything we can to ensure the survival of these creatures in the wild, and every detail helps." Elias studied him for a moment. "I hope that's true. They're rare and vulnerable, and it felt like we were only just starting to understand what we were dealing with." Darian smiled faintly. "You have my word. We're working toward their protection, and if there's ever anything more you're willing to share, please don't hesitate to reach out." He handed Elias a business card, simple and understated, just a name, phone number, and email address with the organization's logo in the corner. Elias accepted it, though he wasn't sure he'd ever use it. As Darian turned to leave, Elias felt a faint echo of the uncertainty he had felt the night the strange little animal had arrived. He had done his part, given it care, ensured its safety, passed it on to those who claimed to know what was best. But what happened next was beyond his control. The visitor's polite words and professional demeanor didn't fully ease the lingering questions in Elias's mind. That evening, after the clinic had closed and Liana had gone home, Elias sat at his desk, holding Darian's card. The room was quiet, the only sound the faint hum of the building's heater. He thought about the choices he had made, the trust he had placed in Nora's sanctuary, and now perhaps in this new visitors' organization. He wondered if he'd ever get the full story, where the little one had come from, how it had ended, up in his care, and whether it would truly find a safe haven. With a sigh, he tucked the card into a drawer and leaned back in his chair. The workday was over, but the questions remained, floating just beneath the surface. For now, though, he could only wait and hope that his small role in the creature's story would lead to something better. Elias glanced down at the card again, turning it over between his fingers. Darian Trent. He'd had plenty of unusual encounters in his career, but something about the man lingered in his mind. There was a polished quality to him, an ease that made him difficult to read. It wasn't just the card or the suit. Something deeper had set Elias on edge, though he couldn't say exactly what. The clinic was quiet. Now the soft hum of the ventilation system was the only sound in the room. Elias leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. He hadn't heard from Nora since that brief email assuring him the creature was safe, and part of him had hoped it would stay that way. No news meant the little one was adjusting, maybe even thriving, but Darian's sudden appearance changed. Everything. Why now? Why him? Elias slid the card into his desk drawer, then locked it. He didn't need more questions tonight. The following days passed in their usual rhythm. Cats, dogs, and the occasional exotic pet filled the waiting room. Liana kept the energy bright, chatting with clients and slipping treats to nervous pups. Here and there, Elias found comfort in the familiar routine, burying himself in the everyday tasks, focusing on what he could control. But as the week wore on, the questions crept back in. Liana, too, seemed more watchful, as if the whole experience with the strange creature had left her on edge. She still had her bright smile and quick wit, but there was a subtle change. A pause before she spoke, a glance toward the windows when she thought no one was looking. One afternoon, as Elias reviewed a dog's x-rays, Liana leaned against the exam room doorway. "That Darian guy ever get back to you?" she asked. Elias glanced up, surprised. "No. Why?" She shrugged, but there was a tension in her expression, just wondering if he found what he was looking for. "I told him everything I knew," Elias said. "Not much more I could offer." Liana nodded slowly, her gaze drifting toward the floor. "It's just, that whole situation still feels off, you know?" Elias set down the x-ray film and gave her his full attention. "What are you thinking?" She hesitated, chewing her bottom lip. "That creature, whatever it was, it changed something around. Here, I can't explain it, but it's like we're still in the middle of a story that hasn't finished yet." Elias leaned back against the counter, arms crossed. "Do you think it's coming back?" Liana looked up sharply, her eyes wide. "No, not that. At least I don't think so, but it feels like it left something behind. Not physically, I mean, just, I don't know, a feeling." Elias frowned. He had sensed it too, though he hadn't been able to put it into words. It was as if the clinic itself had shifted, the usual patterns disrupted. He thought of Darian's visit, of the strange calmness with which he had asked his questions. Maybe Liana was right. Maybe they were still in the middle of a story they couldn't quite see. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "For now, we just keep doing our jobs. If anything else comes up, we'll deal with it." Liana gave a small smile. "You're good at that, you know. Staying grounded." "I try," Elias said, though he wasn't sure he believed it. The days continued, filled with the usual hustle and bustle of clinic life, yet the undercurrent of unease never quite faded. Elias caught himself glancing at the clock more often, as if expecting a call or a visit. Liana began double-checking the locks at the end of the day, even when Elias reassured her everything was secure. It was a subtle shift, but it hung in the air like an unanswered question. Then, late one evening, as Elias finished up paperwork in his office, his phone buzzed. He didn't recognize the number, but something told him to answer. "Dr. Harrison," he said, his voice steady. "Dr. Harrison, it's Nora." Her voice was calm, but there was an urgency beneath the surface. "I need to talk to you. In person." Elias's grip tightened on the phone. "What's going on? I'll explain when I get there. Can I come by the clinic tonight?" He hesitated. "You sure it can't wait until tomorrow?" "No," she said firmly. "It's important." Elias glanced at the clock. It was nearly 9 p.m. "All right, I'll be here." 15 minutes later, the sound of tires crunching on gravel announced her arrival. Elias opened the door to find Nora standing there, her coat pulled tightly around her, her face pale and serious. She stepped inside quickly, glancing around as if expecting someone to be following her. "What's going on?" Elias asked, closing the door behind her. Nora wasted no time. "I'm not sure who you've spoken to since the transfer, but you need to be careful. There are people looking for that creature, people who aren't with my organization." Elias frowned. "What do you mean?" "Darian Trent was here asking questions, but he seemed legitimate." Nora shook her head. "Darian's not who he says he is." The words hit Elias like a jolt. "What are you talking about? He had credentials. He knew about the creature, about your sanctuary. He's a known name in our field," Nora said, "but he's not part of our group. We've had run-ins with him before. He's been linked to organizations that see these animals as commodities. not as something to protect. If he's been here, it means he's watching. It means others might be too. Elias felt his stomach tighten. So what do we do? I don't have the creature anymore. It's at your sanctuary, right? Yes, Nora said. But that doesn't mean it's safe. If they know it's there, they could try to take it. Elias rubbed his temples, trying to make sense of it all. What do you need from me? Elias asked, his voice steady but laced with quiet concern. Information, Nora replied, her eyes searching. His. Anything you can tell me about what Darian asked, how he acted. Anything that might help us figure out what he's planning. We need to stay ahead of him. Elias let his mind drift back to that conversation with Darian. He described the careful questions, the calm demeanor that had seemed so genuine at the time, the way Darian had thanked him politely before leaving without pressing too hard. Nora listened intently, her brow furrowing slightly as she nodded occasionally. That matches what we know, she said finally, her fingers absently tracing the edge of her coat sleeve. He's subtle, but persistent. We'll have to increase security at our facility. She hesitated, then continued more softly. And Dr. Harrison, if he or anyone else comes back here, don't tell them anything. Even if they seem completely legitimate, just call me immediately. Elias nodded slowly, feeling the weight of her words settle in his chest. All right, I'll do that. Nora stood, pulling, her coat tighter around herself as if bracing against an unseen chill. Thank you, she said, her voice warming slightly. I know this isn't what you signed up for, but you've been a tremendous help. I'll keep you updated. As she left, Elias locked the door behind her, his thoughts racing like leaves caught in a sudden gust. The pieces of this puzzle refused to fit together neatly, but one thing had become painfully clear. The strange little creature had cast ripples far wider than anyone could have anticipated. Standing alone in the quiet clinic, Elias realized he'd become part of something much larger than himself. He might just be one small piece in this unfolding story, but he knew with quiet certainty that he couldn't walk away now. Too many lives hung in the balance. He turned off the lights and headed home, the night air cool against his skin, his thoughts swirling like autumn leaves. Tomorrow remained a mystery, but of this he was certain. Their story was far from over. The next few days at the clinic passed in a comforting rhythm of routine appointments and familiar faces. But beneath the surface calm, Elias remained watchful. Nora's warning had taken root in his mind, growing like persistent ivy, its tendrils wrapping around his thoughts during every quiet moment. He found himself replaying Darian's visit like a film reel, searching each frame for clues he might have missed. The exact phrasing of questions, the subtle shifts in tone, the carefully measured pauses between words. What had seemed like polite professionalism now felt layered with hidden meaning. Liana, ever perceptive, noticed the change in him. You've been quiet, she observed one afternoon as they tidied the exam room after a particularly busy morning. Her voice was light, but her eyes held genuine concern. Just a lot on my mind, Elias replied, focusing a little too intently on scrubbing his hands at the sink. She paused, disinfectant bottle in hand, studying his reflection in the glass cabinet. It's about that man, isn't it? The one asking about, you know. Elias sighed, the water running over his fingers as he shut off the faucet. Yeah, and what Nora told me after. It's hard not to think about it. Liana's usual sunny expression clouded as she set down the bottle and leaned against the counter. Do you think he's going to come back? I don't know, Elias admitted, drying his hands slowly. But Nora was clear. If he shows up again, I'm to call her immediately. Liana picked at the label on the disinfectant bottle, her fingers restless. You really trust her? Elias considered this, staring out the window where afternoon sunlight painted golden patterns on the floor. I trust that she wants to protect the creature. That much I'm sure of. Whether she's telling us everything, he trailed off, shaking his head. But she's the best lead we have. Liana nodded slowly, her gaze drifting to the front windows. I just hope that if he does come back, we'll be ready. That evening, as Elias tallied the clinic's monthly inventory, he found his eyes drawn repeatedly to the darkened windows. The parking lot lights cast long, wavering shadows across the reception area, making every passing car headlight feel like a potential threat. He shook his head, frustrated with his own jumpiness, but Nora's warnings echoed in his mind like a persistent heartbeat. He was just finishing the last inventory sheet when his phone buzzed to life, the screen glowing with an unfamiliar number. Elias's breath caught as he hesitated, then answered. Dr. Harrison speaking. A pause. Then that same smooth, measured voice. Dr. Harrison, this is Darian Trent. I hope I'm not calling too late. Elias's fingers tightened around the phone. Mr. Trent, what can I do for you? Darian's tone was warm, almost friendly. I wanted to thank you again for your time the other day. The information you shared was very helpful. A slight pause, but I realized I may have forgotten to ask a few important questions. I was hoping we could meet again to discuss them. The request hung in the air between them. Elias remembered Nora's warning like a flare in his mind. If Darian contacted him again, he was to call her first. But Darian sounded so reasonable, so genuinely interested, that it was hard to reconcile this pleasant voice with Nora's dire warnings. Still, caution won out. I'm afraid I'm quite busy at the moment, Elias said, keeping his voice carefully neutral. Perhaps you could email me your questions instead. A beat of silence. Then Darian replied, his tone unchanged. I understand you're busy, but these aren't the sort of questions that can be answered through email. I'd prefer to speak in person, if possible. Elias felt an icy trickle down his spine, despite the warm clinic air. I'll have to get back to you on that. Of course, Darian said smoothly. Please let me know if you find the time. I'll be in town for a few more days. The call ended, leaving Elias standing in the sudden quiet, his pulse thrumming in his ears. He set the phone down carefully, as if it might shatter, and ran a hand through his hair. There was no ignoring it. Now, he needed to talk to Nora. The next morning, Elias dialed Nora's number with fingers that trembled slightly. She answered on the second ring, her voice sharp with alertness. Nora, it's Elias, he said, the morning sunlight suddenly feeling too bright. I heard from Darian Trent again. Her response was immediate. What did he say? He wanted to meet again, said he had more questions. I told him I was busy, but he insisted it was important, Elias explained, his fingers tightening slightly around the phone. There was a long pause before Nora replied, her voice carrying the weight of experience. Elias, you need to stay away from him. Whatever he's after, it's not good. If he reaches out again, don't engage. Just call me. I understand, Elias said, though his free hand found its way to rub at the tension forming in his neck. But what should I do in the meantime if he shows up here? Keep your doors locked and don't let him in, Nora said firmly, her words leaving no room for compromise. If he gets pushy, call the authorities first, then call me. We'll handle it. Elias nodded, even though she couldn't see the gesture. Got it. He ended the call feeling a strange mix of relief and lingering tension, like the quiet after a summer storm when you know more rain might come. He trusted Nora's expertise completely, but still felt like a small boat caught in much larger currents. For now, all he could do was follow her advice and quietly hope Darian wouldn't push things further. As the week unfolded, Elias and Liana kept the clinic running with its usual comforting rhythm, but the unease never quite lifted. Every time the cheerful bell above the front door chimed, Elias found his head snapping up, half expecting to see Darian's carefully composed face. Each time it was just another loving owner with their beloved pet, he'd feel a warm rush of relief. That quickly cooled into watchfulness. Liana, bless her, had taken on the role of their unofficial lookout. She seemed to always be near the front desk now. Her usual bright chatter softened as her eyes frequently danced to the windows or the security monitor. She didn't speak about it directly, but Elias could see the concern in the way she'd pause. While organizing files or how she'd linger near the door at closing time, her quiet vigilance mirrored his own growing wariness. It wasn't until Friday afternoon, when golden sunlight was streaming through the clinic windows, that something unusual broke their fragile peace. Elias was finishing a routine checkup on a sweet elderly tabby when Liana knocked gently on the exam room door. Elias? Her voice was carefully neutral, the way she spoke when trying not to alarm nervous pet owners. Can you come to the front for a second? He followed her to the reception area where a man stood at the counter, his broad back to them as he spoke quietly with their receptionist. The dark coat and hat that obscured his face sent an unexpected chill through Elias. There was something in the man's posture, the way he carried himself with quiet authority, that seemed hauntingly familiar. When the man turned, Elias's breath caught in his throat. It wasn't Darian, but the resemblance was striking. The same sharp features, the same piercing gaze that seemed to look right through you. This man was older, with distinguished silver at his temples, but the family connection was unmistakable. Dr. Harrison, the man said, his voice smooth as aged whiskey. My name is Stephen Trent. I believe you spoke with my nephew Darian recently. Elias exchanged a quick glance with Liana, seeing his own surprise reflected in her wide eyes. Yes, he was here not long ago, Elias replied, keeping his tone professional. "How can I help you?" Stephen offered a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "I'm afraid my nephew can be overzealous at times. I wanted to personally apologize if he came across as intrusive. Our family has a deep passion for wildlife preservation, and Darian sometimes gets ahead of himself." Elias studied the man carefully, noticing how his hands remained perfectly still as he spoke. "I appreciate the apology, but I'm not sure what you're asking." Stephen raised a hand in a calming gesture, the movement almost theatrical. "I'm not asking for anything. I simply wanted to assure you that we mean no trouble." Darian's questions came from curiosity, nothing more. "I hope you'll forgive him if he seemed too forward." Elias nodded slowly, though his instincts prickled like static before a storm. "I understand. Thank you for letting me know." Stephen inclined his head slightly. "Of course, if you ever need anything, please don't hesitate to reach out." With that, he turned and left, the clinic door swinging shut behind him with a soft chime. That felt far too cheerful for the tension now hanging in the air. Liana appeared at Elias's side, her voice hushed. "Do you believe him?" she asked, her fingers nervously twisting the hem of her scrubs. Elias shook his head slowly. "I don't know, but something tells me this isn't over." Long after Stephen Trent's departure, Elias sat at his desk, bathed in the warm glow of his desk lamp, papers forgotten before him. The resemblance between Stephen and Darian was undeniable, but what unsettled him more was Stephen's demeanor, that carefully cultivated calm that somehow felt more ominous than Darian's polite persistence. It had all the whole Elias of a calculated performance, like a magician distracting his audience before the big reveal. Liana hovered in the doorway, her usual sunny expression clouded with concern. "You're not buying what he said, are you?" Elias looked up, rubbing at the tension in his temples. "No, not really. There was something off about him." She stepped closer, crossing her arms like she was trying to hold in her worry. "You think they're working together?" "Maybe," Elias sighed. "Or maybe Stephen's just here to smooth over whatever waves Darian made. Either way, it doesn't feel like coincidence." Liana's frown deepened. "What do we do now?" Elias leaned back in his chair, the familiar creak oddly comforting. "We stay cautious, keep our eyes open, and if they come back, we follow Nora's advice. No answers, no information, just a phone call to her." Liana nodded, but the worry in her eyes remained shining like unshed tears. "Okay, but Elias, if they're as connected as they seem, what's stopping them from just taking what they want?" Elias didn't have a good answer for that. The question had been circling his own thoughts like a restless animal in a cage. The idea of someone forcing their way into their peaceful clinic was unsettling, but so far, everything had been words. Polite visits, carefully phrased questions, veiled warnings wrapped in civility. But the unspoken question hung between them. How long would the civility last? The following days passed with deceptive normalcy, but the tension never truly dissipated. Elias and Liana moved through their routines with practiced ease, treating their furry patients with gentle hands and warm smiles, all while maintaining a quiet vigilance. Each phone ring made Elias's shoulders tense. Every door opening brought a fleeting moment of apprehension. He wasn't sure if he was being overly cautious or if he was simply waiting for the moment when their fragile peace would finally shatter. One quiet afternoon as the clinic was winding down, its usual cheerful bustle softening into golden hour. Calm, an unexpected package arrived. The courier handed it off at the front desk with little fanfare, and Liana signed for it with a curious tilt of her head. She carried it back to Elias's office, setting it gently on his desk with a questioning, "Look, you expecting something?" she asked, her fingers lingering on the plain cardboard box. Elias shook his head, his brow furrowing slightly. "No, I didn't order anything." They both studied the unassuming package, a standard shipping box with no distinguishing Elias beyond the delivery label. The sender's name was unfamiliar, just an address from another state with no company listed. "Should we open it?" Liana asked, her voice dropping to a near whisper, as if the box might hear them. Elias hesitated only a moment before nodding. "Better to know what we're dealing with." Liana handed him a box cutter, their fingers brushing briefly in that small moment of shared anticipation. As Elias carefully sliced through the tape, the first thing revealed was a plain white envelope resting atop protective packing material. He opened it first, withdrawing a single sheet of paper bearing a typed message. "Dr. Harrison, I believe you've come into contact with something extraordinary. This package contains information that might help you understand the significance of what you encountered. Please review it carefully and consider reaching out to discuss further." Elias and Liana exchanged a glance that spoke volumes. Curiosity, concern, and that now familiar prickle of unease all passing between them in that silent moment. "That's vague," Liana murmured, her fingers twisting the hem of her scrubs. "Yeah," Elias agreed, setting the note aside with deliberate care. He pulled back the packing material to reveal a thick folder stuffed with photocopied documents, handwritten notes, and photographs that smelled faintly of aged paper. As Elias flipped through them, his heart sank like a stone in still water. It was a comprehensive dossier on the creature, detailed observations of its physical characteristics, behavioral patterns, and preferred habitat. The photographs showed misty forest scenes, faint tracks preserved in mud like nature's own fingerprints, and what appeared to be a small, expertly concealed burrow nestled among tree roots. The handwritten notes speculated about the creature's origins, its role in the delicate balance of the ecosystem, and, most unsettlingly, its possible intelligence. Liana leaned over his shoulder, her breath warm against his cheek as she whispered, "Where did this come from? Who sent it?" Elias shook his head slowly, the papers trembling slightly in his hands. "I don't know, but whoever it is, they've been studying the creature for a long time." A chill crept down his spine as realization dawned. This mysterious sender might know more about the creature than even Nora did. And if they knew this much, what else did they know? Did they know it had passed through his clinic? Did they know where it was now? The last page of the dossier caught his attention like a snag in fabric. A map marked with several precise locations. One marked spot burned into Elias's vision, their clinic, his stomach twisted into knots. "Liana," he said, his voice suddenly, "Horse, lock the doors now." She nodded, her usual sunny expression replaced by solemn understanding. "I'll check the back too." As Liana hurried out, Elias stared at the map until his vision blurred. This wasn't just about the creature anymore. Someone was watching them, tracking the clinic's involvement with disturbing precision. Nora's warnings, Darian's visit, Stephen's carefully worded apology. The pieces were clicking together like tumblers in a lock, revealing a picture he desperately wished wasn't taking shape. When Liana returned, her phone was clutched tightly in her hand. "I think you should call Nora," she said quietly. Elias nodded, already reaching for his own phone. Nora answered on the second ring, and he quickly explained everything. The mysterious package, the detailed dossier, the ominous map with their clinic clearly marked. There was a beat of silence before Nora spoke, her voice carrying a new urgency. "Elias, you need to leave the clinic." "What?" The request caught him off guard. "Just for the night," Nora clarified, though her tone offered little comfort. "Lock everything up and go somewhere safe. If they have a map with your clinic marked, it's not safe to stay there right now." Elias glanced at Liana, who stood in the doorway looking more like a frightened fawn than the confident vet tech he knew. "All right," he agreed. "We'll close up and head out." "Good," Nora said. "And keep me updated if anything else happens." After ending the call, Elias and Liana moved through the clinic like shadows, securing every door, turning off lights with unnecessary care, double-checking security cameras that suddenly felt woefully inadequate. When they finally left, driving separately to their respective homes, Elias couldn't shake the sensation of unseen eyes watching his every move, even as he pulled into his familiar driveway. That night, sleep remained stubbornly out of reach. Each time Elias closed his eyes, he saw the dossier pages fluttering like autumn leaves, the map burning behind his eyelids. Who had sent the package? What did they truly want? And most pressing of all, just how much danger had they unknowingly stepped into? Morning arrived far too soon, bringing no answers and little rest. Elias moved through his routine by rote, brewing coffee that did nothing to warm the chill in his bones, staring out at his quiet neighborhood, where everything appeared perfectly normal. The ordinary world outside his window now felt like a distant memory, something he could observe but no longer quite belonged to. He checked his phone. No messages from Nora, no updates from Liana. For a fleeting moment, he considered returning to the clinic just to reassure himself everything was fine. But Nora's warning echoed in his mind, so instead he spread the dossier across his dining table like pieces of a puzzle. The notes were meticulous, filled with details about the creature's anatomy and behavior that spoke of long observation. The photographs, though grainy, clearly showed those distinctive features. The rounded ears like velvet petals, the golden eyes that seemed to hold ancient knowledge, the thick paw pads perfect for silent movement. It was all there, laid bare in black and white. But the map troubled him most of all. Their clinic wasn't the only marked location. There was a remote cabin nestled in dense woods, an isolated stretch of riverbank where the water would run cold and deep, and a small research station that looked official enough to raise more questions than answers. Each marked spot felt like another piece of a mystery he wasn't sure he wanted to solve. Elias stared at the unfamiliar documents spread before him, his fingers tracing the edges of a grainy photograph. He couldn't make sense of it. The careful notations, the precise coordinates, but one thing shone clear as morning light. Whoever had compiled this dossier knew the creature's movements intimately, knew exactly where it had been taken. A surge of frustration warmed his cheeks. He wasn't some globe-trotting detective or a field biologist trekking through rainforests. He was just a veterinarian, a man who dedicated his life to healing paws and soothing whimpers, to the quiet joy of watching a sick animal regain its spark. This shadowy game of intrigue wasn't what he'd signed up for, yet here he was, caught in the current whether he liked it or not. The realization settled over him like the first snow of winter, soft but inescapable. He couldn't turn away now, not when something so extraordinary needed protecting. When his phone buzzed that afternoon, the screen illuminated with Nora's name and a simple request. "Can you meet me at the sanctuary tomorrow? We need to talk." Elias studied the message as one might examine an X-ray, searching for hidden fractures in those few words. His reply came slowly but surely. "I'll be there." As he hit send, the weight of commitment settled on his shoulders, not heavy, but present, like a well-worn lab coat. The mystery wouldn't solve itself, and if answers were to be found, he'd have to walk this unfamiliar path, one careful step at a time. Morning painted the sanctuary in gold when Elias arrived, the sun stretching its fingers over rolling hills and whispering forests. The gravel crunched warmly beneath his boots as he approached the modest building where Nora waited, her posture straight, but her smile as welcoming as an open hearth. "Thanks for coming," she said, ushering him inside where the air carried the comforting scent of cedar and dried herbs, like walking into a forest's embrace. Walls adorned with photographs of rare species told silent stories of conservation, while the central table bore the evidence of urgent work, maps dotted with pins, stacks of well-thumbed reports, and field equipment that spoke of hands-on dedication. Nora gestured to a chair as sunlight pooled across the table. "We've been analyzing that mysterious package," she began, her voice steady but her fingers betraying a slight tremor as they brushed the documents. "It's troubling, to say the least." Elias settled into the chair, his hands folding together like the wings of a resting bird. "Do you know who sent it?" Her head shook, sending strands of hair dancing in the sunlight. "Not yet, but their knowledge, it's deeper than we imagined possible outside our circle." She tapped the reproduced map. "They're tracking not just our rescued friend, but possibly others." Elias's stomach dropped like a stone in still water. "Others? You mean there's more than one?" Nora's eyes narrowed thoughtfully, the way they might when examining a difficult case file. "We've always held the hope, but this..." Her finger traced a cluster of map coordinates. "This suggests either a wider natural range than we knew, or," her voice darkened, "that someone's been moving them deliberately." The implication bloomed in Elias's mind like ink in water. So the one we found, it might not have been lost at all. It could have been placed there, a grave nod, which would mean we're dealing with people far more organized and dangerous than we'd guessed. A chill traced Elias's spine as Darian Trent's polished smile flashed in his memory. He tucked that thought away for now. Some suspicions needed nurturing before being voiced. "So what's our move?" he asked instead. Nora spread documents across the table like playing cards in some high-stakes game. "First, verification. Some marked locations we know, others..." She pointed to several circled areas. "My team's investigating these now. Meanwhile, we're reinforcing sanctuary security. Extra patrols, more cameras, motion-sensitive perimeter lights." Elias nodded, though the measures felt both necessary and insufficient, like trying to catch rainwater with a sieve. Nora seemed to read his hesitation in the way his fingers drummed the tabletop. "Elias," she said, her voice softening like butter left in sunlight, "I know this feels overwhelming, but you're not alone in this fight. There are more of us. Good people working in the shadows to protect what's precious." He exhaled slowly, watching dust motes dance in a sunbeam. "I just wish we understood their endgame. What could they possibly want?" Nora's sigh carried the weight of years spent battling such questions. Control, she said simply. To some, rarity equals value, something to exploit, sell, or wield as power. But to us, her hand rested briefly atop a photograph of the creature's golden eyes, their lives worth preserving. That's what this battle is, their right to exist, versus someone's greed. Elias's thoughts drifted to those luminous eyes that had seemed to see straight into him during those brief days of care. He might not understand what the creature was, but he knew with bone-deep certainty what it deserved. Not to be some collector's trophy or laboratory specimen, but to live free, to follow whatever mysterious path its kind had walked for who knew how long. "All right," he said at last, the words solid as an oak branch. "Tell me what you need from me." Nora's smile bloomed then, warm as the sunlight now spilling across the documents between them. "For now, just keep those sharp eyes open. If anything, anything. Heartwarming feels off, you call me. Day or night? We're building a network to track any sightings or movements," Nora explained, her voice carrying the quiet strength of someone used to rallying allies. "The more information we gather, the better chance we have of staying one step ahead." Elias nodded, feeling his resolve crystallize like morning frost on a steadfast leaf. He might not have chosen this path, but now that his feet were firmly planted upon it, he wouldn't turn back. He owed it to the wide-eyed creature he'd nursed to health, to whatever others might still be wandering lost in the world, and to that quiet voice within himself that always whispered to protect what was vulnerable. For the next hour, they pored over the dossier together, their heads bent close like students deciphering some ancient text. Nora outlined her team's movements, which forest clearings they were scouting, what new security measures were being woven around the sanctuary's borders. Like an invisible net of protection, Elias offered what insights he could, though he still felt like a man trying to assemble a puzzle with half the pieces turned upside down. When they finally rose from the table, the sun had climbed higher, painting sharp geometric shadows across the gravel path as Nora walked him to his car. As Elias opened the door, she placed a hand on his arm, her touch warm and steadying. "Thank you, Elias," she said, her eyes holding that particular glint reserved for kindred spirits. "I know this road isn't easy, but it means the world to have someone like you beside us." He returned her smile, small but genuine. "We're in this together, right?" "Right," she affirmed, giving his arm a final squeeze before stepping back. "Stay safe." The drive home felt both ordinary and charged with possibility. Though unease still fluttered at the edges of his thoughts like moths around a lantern, Elias also carried a new sense of purpose, warm and solid in his chest. For now, he would focus on what lay within his power, keeping watchful eyes, maintaining that lifeline to Nora, and honoring the silent promise he'd made to those mysterious creatures who had, however briefly, crossed his path. The clinic welcomed him back the next morning with its familiar rhythms. As sunlight streamed through the windows, painting the reception area in buttery gold, Elias moved through his routine with renewed focus. Nora's team was out there following leads, and that knowledge lent him a quiet comfort, even as he remained alert for any sign of Darian or Stephen's return. Liana, ever perceptive, appeared mid-morning bearing a steaming mug of coffee, her silent way of checking in. "You're not as tense as yesterday," she observed, setting the cup on his desk with a soft clink. Elias offered a tired but grateful smile. "Just trying to keep all the plates spinning," he admitted. She perched on the edge of his desk, her curiosity shining through. "Heard from Nora again?" "Not since yesterday," Elias said, wrapping his hands around the warm mug. "But her team's following up on some leads." Liana nodded, her shoulders relaxing slightly. "Well, that's something at least. Nice to know we've got backup." Elias found himself smiling properly then, buoyed by her steadfast presence. Even amid uncertainty, Liana had a way of anchoring him to the present moment, to the tangible work of caring for their furry patients. The day unfolded in its usual comforting pattern, the jingle of the doorbell, the soft padding of paws on tile, the murmured reassurances to nervous pet owners. Yet each time the bell chimed, Elias's pulse did a little dance of anticipation, as if the next visitor might carry some crucial piece of their unfolding mystery. As afternoon melted into evening and the clinic's pace slowed, Liana moved to the back to prepare supplies, her humming drifting down the hallway like a balm. Elias was reviewing tomorrow's schedule when movement at the window caught his eye, a shadow lingering just beyond the glass. His pen stilled as he watched the figure stand motionless for several heartbeats, as if gathering courage, or perhaps assessing the situation. Before Elias could move to the door, the man finally entered, bringing with him a whisper of crisp autumn air. He was older, his face lined with years of outdoor living, his sharp eyes missing nothing. His navy jacket and well-worn ball cap gave him the look of a man who valued function over fashion. When those keen eyes locked onto Elias, they carried a weight of unspoken knowledge. "Can I help you?" Elias asked, keeping his voice level as he stepped forward. The stranger's gaze swept the room before settling. "I'm looking for Dr. Harrison," he said, his voice as steady as an old oak. "That's me," Elias replied. "What can I do for you?" The man, Frank Simmons, he introduced himself, stepped closer with deliberate movements. "I work with a private research organization," he began, choosing his words with the care of someone used to being overheard. "We're interested in unique biological specimens, animals that defy ordinary classification. I've heard you might have encountered something unusual recently." Elias felt the hairs on his neck rise, even as he maintained his professional demeanor. "I'm not sure what you're referring to, Mr. Simmons." Frank tilted his head slightly, the gesture reminding Elias of a bird considering its next move. "I mean a creature that's not quite dog, not quite wolf, something that doesn't fit the usual patterns." The directness sent a ripple through Elias's carefully maintained calm. "I'm sorry," he said, folding his arms in what he hoped looked like casual professionalism rather than the defensive gesture it was. "But veterinarian-client confidentiality prevents me from discussing specific cases." Frank's lips curved in a smile. That didn't quite reach his watchful eyes. "I understand discretion is paramount in your profession, but you should know my organization means these creatures no harm. We only wish to study them, to understand and preserve them." Elias held his ground, thinking of golden eyes and silent understandings. "If preservation is your goal, you'd want to coordinate with proper conservation authorities. I'm just a small-town vet." Frank nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "Of course," he conceded, withdrawing a business card from his pocket and placing it carefully on the counter between them. "But sometimes the most interesting paths begin with simple conversations. If you ever feel like talking, give me a call," Frank offered, his voice smooth as creek water over stones. Elias left the business card untouched on the counter, its crisp edges gleaming under the clinic lights. "I'll keep that in mind," Elias replied, watching as Frank's smile remained fixed like a mask. The man gave a slight nod, the motion as precise as clockwork before turning toward the door. Elias held his breath until Frank's silhouette dissolved into the street's afternoon bustle, then exhaled slowly, his pulse still drumming a restless rhythm against his ribs. Liana emerged from the back room, drying her hands on a well-worn towel. "Who was that?" she asked, her voice carrying the gentle curiosity of summer wind chimes. Elias glanced at the abandoned card, but resisted the urge to touch it. "Just someone asking questions," he said, offering her a reassuring smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Nothing to worry about." Liana's brow knitted like two threads being drawn together, but she didn't press further. "All right," she said, shifting gears with practiced ease. "I'm almost done with the inventory. Want me to lock up when I finish?" Elias nodded gratefully. "Yeah, thanks. I'll be in my office." Behind the closed door, Elias sank into his chair like a leaf settling on a pond surface. Frank's visit had left him unsettled, not just the man's unsettling knowledge, but the quiet certainty in his voice that suggested this was merely the opening move in a much longer game. Nora's warnings about caution echoed in his mind, each word now carrying new weight. If Frank was connected to the mysterious package senders, or worse, to Darian and Stephen's polished duo, then the web of interest surrounding these creatures was far more extensive than he'd imagined. His phone sat heavy in his palm as he debated calling Nora. After a moment's hesitation, he set it aside. Not yet. He'd wait to see if Frank made another move before sounding alarms. For now, vigilance would have to be his shield, and Nora's team his unseen guardians. The evening unfolded with deceptive tranquility, but Elias carried his unease like a stone in his pocket. Leaving the clinic, he found himself pausing beneath the amber glow of parking lot lights, their long shadows stretching toward him like tentative fingers. The crisp night air did little to dispel the fog of worry that had settled over him in recent weeks. At home, the familiar walls seemed to hold their breath as he moved through his nightly routine. The click of locks engaging, the hiss of the kettle, the warm ceramic of his favorite mug between his palms. Each ordinary action now carried new significance. Steam curled from his tea like living smoke signals as he pondered the creature's golden eyes that had first kindled this unexpected journey. Those eyes haunted him now, not with fear but with a profound sense of responsibility. He thought of Nora's steadfast determination, Liana's quiet bravery, the shadowy figures circling ever closer, and most of all, that small, mysterious life that had trusted him, however briefly. As midnight's hush settled over his neighborhood, Elias lay staring at the ceiling, where moonlight painted shifting patterns. He wasn't just a veterinarian anymore. He'd become a guardian in a story much larger than himself. The path ahead wound through unknown territory, but one truth shone clear. Turning back was no longer an option. Too many lives, human and otherwise, now depended on choices yet to be made. And so Elias resolved to walk forward, one careful step at a time, guided by the simple conviction that even the smallest light could matter in the gathering dark. Ever since that creature had appeared on his doorstep, everything had changed. He reached for his phone and opened his email, but there were no new messages from Nora, no updates from Liana. The silence wrapped around him like a heavy blanket, both a relief and a prickling source of anxiety. No news could mean the creature was safe, nestled away in the sanctuary like a hidden treasure, or it could mean the forces searching for it were drawing closer, weaving their plans in the shadows. Elias leaned back in his chair, his gaze drifting to the ceiling as if it held the answers he needed. He didn't know how much longer he could live like this, waiting for the next unexpected knock at the door, the next whispered warning. He wanted to believe the creature would be all right, that Nora's team would shield it like guardians of something precious, that all of this would one day soften into a distant memory. But deep down, he knew it wasn't that simple. The next morning, Elias arrived at the clinic early, the air still fresh with the crispness of dawn. Liana was already there, humming softly as she checked supplies and organized the day's appointments. She looked up as he walked in, her smile warm but tinged with concern. "Morning," she said. "Everything okay?" Elias nodded, though he wasn't entirely sure it was true. As okay as it can be. Liana hesitated, then asked, "Do you think we'll hear from them again?" Elias didn't have an answer. He shrugged, offering her the best reassurance he could. "I don't know, but if we do, we'll handle it. We've gotten this far." She seemed to take comfort in his words, even if he wasn't sure he fully believed them himself. Together they settled into their work, tending to patients and losing themselves in the rhythm of the day. The routine was steadying, like an anchor in shifting tides, but beneath it all a quiet unease lingered, a whisper that their world had been forever changed in ways they couldn't yet grasp. The day passed without incident, and as the afternoon melted into golden light, Elias found his thoughts drifting less toward the creature and more toward the future. He had learned to navigate these unexpected storms, to keep moving forward even when the path ahead was shrouded in mist. He didn't know what the next chapter held, but he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't facing it alone. That evening, as Liana locked up the clinic, double-checking the doors and security cameras with careful hands, Elias felt a flicker of hope kindling in his chest. They had weathered the storm together, and though the skies were still uncertain, there was a quiet strength in knowing they could face whatever came next. Elias turned off the lights, locked his office, and stepped outside. The night air was cool, the street hushed and peaceful. Above him, the stars shimmered like scattered diamonds, tiny beacons of light in the vast darkness. For the first time in weeks, a sense of calm settled over him. He didn't have all the answers, maybe he never would, but he had done what he could, and that mattered. As he drove home, the clinic fading into the distance behind him, Elias allowed himself to exhale. The road ahead was uncertain, but he was ready to walk it one step at a time. The creature, wherever it was, had changed everything, but it had also reminded him of why he had become a veterinarian in the first place: to care, to protect, to make a difference, and for that he would always be grateful.